project, which is based on some of the OpenStack core components called Heat API. So I thought I'd take the opportunity today just to use the captive audience and provide a bit of visibility about a new project which you may or may not have heard about. Yeah. So as I mentioned, it's only started this year, back in March. I've been involved with it initially on a part-time basis and now full-time over the last few months. And the summary is, it's an AWS CloudFormation API for OpenStack, and it allows you to use pretty much 100% compatible with the AWS template syntax, and the goal was to allow easy migration for existing AWS.
What's CloudFormation?
So CloudFormation is an Amazon product. It allows you to have multiple EC2 instances plus other Amazon components orchestrated into a cloud application, which could be multiple instances plus other services. And the way which they break that up is into multiple resource types. And so what we've done on Heat is, in the Heat project, we've basically mapped the Amazon resource types to similar or the same capabilities in OpenStack. And so that's an ongoing effort. We've already managed to get reasonably well through the efforts to get to the point where we've got parity with AWS. We're not all the way there yet, but we're still adding things all the time. It is at the point now where there's enough there for it to be useful and for people to do some testing, and that we have got some sort of proof of concept industrial interest. So I'm hoping that we can get other people to start using it and stimulate some discussion and get some ideas in terms of how we move forward with it. The other thing which I've been primarily working on in the last little while is it's got an AWS compatible API. So Amazon provide, well, they call it a REST API, it's not really very RESTful, but they provide an HTTP API which we've basically emulated. And one way which we've used to validate that is we've got a command line client which uses the Boto client library, which talks to AWS services, including CloudFormation, and it will now talk to Heat. So that's just an idea that we've got reasonable parity in some areas, or in quite a few areas now. The other area which is quite interesting is we've got orchestration capability related to high availability. So we can do instance monitoring and service level monitoring, and if a service suddenly goes away unexpectedly on an instance within your stack, we can just restart it, and if that doesn't work after a few times, it will restart the instance. And again, that's the capability in that area is growing all the time, but we've got basic HA features in there now. The other area which is interesting and has gone in quite recently is auto-scaling of Stack instances. So you can define a cluster of Nova instances, effectively, which will scale up or down depending on metrics which are gathered from the instances in your stack. And the other interesting area is you can have composite templates, which is basically where you can have a template which includes another template, and that allows you to quite easily build up very complicated hierarchies of templated cloud applications without necessarily having one huge template. So the design goals are basically, we're really aiming to try and get this to be an integrated part of OpenStack. And so with that in mind, we've tried to use a very similar layout for the code wherever possible. It uses as many of the OpenStack core and common modules and components as we can. And we've got quite close integration with Keystone, Glance and Nova. It uses the Nova Client API for all of the instance management, and Keystone for the authentication, and it supports both EC2 style authentication and also plain Keystone authentication as well via the API. I've already mentioned that the idea is, at least initially, to simplify AWS migration to OpenStack. It may be that we end up maintaining more than one API, so the Amazon API is not without its idiosyncrasies, and so it may be that not everyone wants to use AWS and they may want to use some of the other features of Heat, in which case we might have a cleaner, pure REST-based API, which is either underneath or in parallel with the current AWS API implementation. And it also uses the AMQP messaging system in pretty much exactly the same way as Nova, and so hopefully that will allow us to scale once we get past the initial testing stages. And at the moment, I think that there's been something posted to the list quite recently where we're aiming to try and get OpenStack incubation within the next couple of releases and gain as much community participation as we can, really. So this is just a quick overview. I won't go through this in great detail, but this is just to give you an idea of how the internal architecture works. And so you would basically have a template, which, as I've mentioned, will be an AWS compatible template fed in via the Heap command line tool. This is basically providing the capability of the AWS CFN tools. Okay, AWS CFN tools, that goes through the Heap REST API. It's not really very RESTful, as I mentioned. We're dummying up the CloudFormations API. Metadata server allows instance metrics and health data to be pushed back via another API into the engine, which can then do things like restarting instances. And that is basically it. So I hope that if anyone is interested in this kind of area of OpenStack deployments, you might come and drop in on Freenode or catch up with me afterwards, and I'll let you know more.